Okie dokie. I had some stream troubles apparently. This is the first time I've noticed that my stream completely dropped. I don't exactly know what happened there. But hey, that's cool. I've got some oh, this is interesting. Yeah, it looks like maybe the open broadcaster software went downhill. I don't know. It's interesting, but I went to the thought journal and we're going to see if we can grab a thought paper. And I was clicking around and here we are. So, only a few minutes lost, which is not too bad. So we had rejecting the implicit consensus of Applied Jenkins. Let's see if this is available. Let's see if faith, fictionalism, and bullshit is, although I'm pretty sure I would have clicked on bullshit already. So hey, it's there at ResearchGate now. That's cool. Well, can't read the one on that one then. And then we got this one on the circular reading of Frege's indefinability argument. And that's not there. So, faith, fictionalism, and bullshit. Oh, it's a LibreOffice one. Okay, that's alright. So, if you are good enough to join me live one day, and please do. It's fun to have a chat, and people saying stuff that's interesting. You can grab the paper and follow along by typing !paper in the chat box. Huh. Says I'm gone back to zeros again on my preview. This is very disconcerting sometimes. Anyway, we'll see. Hopefully this will be okay. Alright, let's see. Let's get a little zoom on this. There we go. Okay, no abstract. We're not abstracting. Faith, Fictionalism, Bullshit by Michael Scott. According to a simple formulation of doxasticism, we are good at, making up words. We got the doxa, and we've used it a million times in doxasticism. Doxasticism about proposed faith, dox. Necessarily faith that P is accompanied by belief that P. So, okay, so this is sort of like a knowledge thing. So, knowledge P is accompanied by belief that P, but no, we're talking about faith. So, faith is accompanied by, in some sort of understanding of accompanied by belief. For example, according to Dox, to have faith that one, God created the world, requires that one is believed. I don't know, maybe not. We'll see. Support of doxa system is long-standing and was rarely a matter of dispute until William Alston, 96, opposed the following content of propositional faith need not be believed if it is accepted. Following Cohen, 92, acceptance that P is understood as a commitment to go along with P, that is, to use P as an assumption in the acceptor's theoretical and practical reasoning. Acceptance, unlike belief, is taken to be typically voluntary and may be prompted by pragmatic considerations rather than the truth of the proposition. Since Alston theories of propositional faith that reject dox have proliferated, these theories replace belief with attitudes that, while not always called acceptance, have a similar profile. The faithful agent assents to, assumes, goes along with, acquiesces to, or places their trust in the proposition in question without having to believe it. I will call theories that reject the necessary connection between faith and belief in favor of an acceptance theory of faith non-doxasticism. Recent supporters of non-doxasticism see faith without belief as commonplace among the faithful, supported by familiar examples including cases of individuals who doubt the propositional content of their faith, or are prepared to affirm their faith but not their belief in a proposition. According to Alston, a sizable proportion of contemporary, sincere, devout Christians are acceptors rather than believers. John Schellenberg goes as far as to suggest that faith is positively incompatible with belief. Wow. Although in subsequent work he allows one may have faith in and believe a proposition. Although I would like to now I realize what I'm doing. I'm talking about some Christian stuff on Easter Sunday. Happy Easter Sunday, everyone, although I believe the Orthodox celebrate it next week. Happy Easter Sunday, everyone. I hope you have an excellent Easter Sunday, and excellent day, and Easter, and everyone else has a good day, too. So, this is sort of apt to pick out one on faith on Easter Sunday, when you've got Christ is risen. I do know some people, because I know some of the non-classical logicians, and there's a bunch of people that in the Christian tradition, actually, that are trying to understand the contradictions of the Christian faith through non-classical logic. So, I'm sure I hope they're having a good day. Hello, everybody, for watching. One notable theoretical upshot of non-doxasticism is for the epistemology of faith. If faith that P requires a commitment to treating P as if it were true rather than belief that P, it seems that non-doxasticism can easily sweep aside the complaint that faith is irrational because it is not supported by evidence sufficient for rational belief. The theory is additionally motivated by the appearance of doxasticism as a relatively soft target. While there is an impressive tradition of support for doxasticism, where are the arguments? Support by theologians and philosophers, however distinguished and luminous, does not show that dox is true. Appealing to the self-evidence of doxasticism is unpersuasive if, as non-doxasticists argue, faith is compatible with periods of doubt. For its supporters, therefore, non-doxasticism is a win-win. It smooths the way to epistemically respectable religious faith, while providing a much-needed correction to a traditional view of faith that, however impeccable its historical credentials might be, lacks supporting philosophical argument. Moreover, while there has been some forceful pushback against the arguments in favor of non-doxasticism, the theory has yet faces no substantial challenges. Despite the historical novelty of the theory, it is unsurprising that non-doxasticism has come to dominate the literature in the field. Well, I mean, that's just philosophical trend following. You got something new and shiny, everyone jumps on it for a little while. I mean, the 90s is not that far away in philosophy time. And especially in this case, just sort of like the sociology of these theories. If you've got some big theory, the same thing I'm thinking about in terms of belief is the Gettier problem. Justified true belief. Everyone kind of was on the justified true belief train if you believe Gettier before 1963. You know, if it's just like, it was a traditional view, and it had basically impeccable historical credentials. Even though no one really questioned it, or people sort of accepted that stuff, that's fine. I mean, that doesn't mean it can't be changed. And, you know, I suspect we're going to have, I think we're starting to see some people just go back to justified true belief again because they can't find anything else. So this is what happens. You've got some big old thing, someone comes in with the new shiny, and not to discount the quality of the philosophy here or with Gettier, but I mean, there is a sociology to how philosophers and everyone else treats new theories, so there's no problem with any of this as far as I can see. Okay, the purpose of this paper is to redress the balance by identifying a substantive philosophical challenge to non-doxasticism. The objection, I will argue, comes into view when we draw out the implications of non-doxasticism in the philosophy of language. Overlooking questions about language is perhaps understandable for a debate that has hitherto largely been situated in the field of epistemology. In practice, however, it has made some of the critical theoretical costs of non-doxasticism, as well as some of the principal reasons for retaining the belief requirement, hard to see. The objection takes the form of a dilemma about the interpretation of affirmations of religious propositional faith. One horn of this dilemma commits non-doxasticists to a substantive, contentious, and little explored theory about religious discourse. The other runs into a problem about the integrity of religious discourse and its speakers. To set up the dilemma, I will argue in the following section for 3 claims about assertion, bullshit, and religious discourse. Clicky. Okay. Although each of these touches on substantial and controversial areas of philosophy, the claims themselves are modest. In Section 2, I will present the dilemma, and in Section 3, consider responses. Before I proceed, 2 clarifications are in order. First, Propositional faith need not have a content that is ostensibly religious. One can have faith that Brazil will win the next World Cup or that Donald Trump will win the presidential election in 2020. However, since doxasticism and non-doxasticism are sometimes put forward as specific to religious faith, or in Platinga's case, Christian faith, I will restrict the discussion to common religious cases. Second, since acceptance that P is prima facie compatible with disbelief that P, or belief that not P, some proponents of non-doxasticism, and add the condition DC, faith that P is inconsistent with disbelief that P, or belief that P is untrue. Since this condition avoids the incongruity of atheists being capable of religious faith, versions of non-doxasticism that endorse DC will be the main focus of this paper. Both of these restrictions are in place to target the main varieties of non-doxasticism on the market. Neither of them are required for the argument of this paper to work. It can be extended to non-religious cases. And the dilemma presents even more serious difficulties to versions of non-doxasticism that reject DC. So faith is inconsistent with disbelief of some proposition. All right, well, disbelief is much stronger than, okay. Believing something is not believing something. Assertions, bullshit, religious utterances. Whoa, this is 22 pages. Alright, so there's a long paper for thought, but that's okay. A fruitful and widely adopted way of understanding speech acts as linguistic practices with a fruitful and widely adopted way of understanding speech acts is as linguistic practices with distinctive norms. Normative practice is an activity with a standard of proper conduct. Sports and games with defined rules are a familiar example. For example, there are standard rules of chess, including permissions. You can offer a draw or resignation at any time. Requirements: the king cannot be left in check, and prohibitions: the bishop can only move diagonally. Breaking or ignoring these rules would be to play the game improperly. We can also think of speech acts as linguistic practices governed by rules for their correct employment with different speech acts, assertion, questions, testimony, apologies, promises, expressions of intentions, and so on, having characteristic norms. If someone violates a norm or of assertion, for instance, it is as William proposes, much as if he had broken a rule of a game. He has cheated. On this view, the speech act, like a game, and unlike an act of jumping, is constituted by rules. That doesn't make any sense. You don't cheat in a language by violating a speech act. You violate making any sense usually. It's not like you get to the end faster. So like if you stop talking in a sensical way, you don't cheat as in the sense of a game where you get ahead. So that's really weird. Okay. Unless you spirit games like a game and unlike the act of jumping is constituted by, we'll see. I mean, that's a weird example. What are the norms of assertion? A common starting point is a belief norm. In asserting P, the speaker should believe that P. As Kent Bach puts it, it seems to me, based on general considerations about speech acts, the only relevant rule on assertion is belief, since an assertion is essentially the expression of a belief. Among normative accounts of assertion, BN has received broad, if not quite universal, agreement. Yeah, we were just talking about Moore's paradox. You assert P, but then you say you don't believe it. So this is goes back to Moore, this claim that like there's something very weird if you assert something, but then you say you don't believe it. Most subsequent philosophical debate has focused on whether BN is too weak. Williamson proposes a knowledge norm, and whether additional norms, in particular ones relating to retraction and justification, also characterize assertion. For the purposes of this paper, however, we need only assume that BN is a norm of assertion. BN is the first of three assumptions advertised above. For the rest of this paper, I will treat assertion as belief-normed speech and set aside debates about additional norms. You know, that's kind of interesting, how we understand treating this the belief claim as a norm. I'm not sure, because I know something about it. This seems a little suspicious to me, actually, to treat it as a normative rule that we have to believe it. Okay. Two notable ways in which BN may be violated are by the speaker asserting a proposition that she believes to be untrue, or by asserting a proposition that she neither believes nor disbelieves. I mean, okay. There's ways around that, but no, may not matter here. There are ways of exploiting assertions that are associated with lying and bullshitting respectively. Harry Frankfurt, in his celebrated essay on bullshit, expands the account of bullshitting by positing various motivations and attitudes on the part of the bullshitter. Counterexamples have been raised to these proposals in subsequent literature. For example, Frankfurt suggests that the bullshitter does not care what the audience thinks on the matters that she is talking about, but a candidate facing an exam question that she has not revised for might make claims that she does not believe to be true in the hopes that the examiner believes them. For our purposes, however, we neither a comprehensive theory of bullshitting or bullshit, nor to specify the psychological profile of bullshitters. The contention here is modest. BS. Asserting an indicative sentence without believing it to be true or believing it to be false is prima facie bullshitting. This just seems more like agnosticism. I'm not really with this at all, because I'd say, look, you can assert things with sort of an agnostic view on whether it's true, or believing it to be true or believing it to be false. You may not know. What if you're asserting something and you're just not sure? That would seem to be very different from bullshit. Okay. For instance, now we're going political, okay. For instance, suppose a person who is known neither for their emotional maturity nor their intellectual prowess asserts, I am a stable genius. I did not know this was coming. Alright. Don't get too political in this podcast series, I guess, but now we are. Suppose also that while the speaker does not believe that this is true, because of an exaggerated sense of his own abilities, he does not disbelieve it. According to BS, 2 is thereby a prima facie case of bullshitting. BS is the second assumption. So we've got the assertion implies belief, and BS of that if you don't neither believe nor disbelieve it, then you're BSing. Aside from its linguistic property, Frankfurt pinpoints two ways in which bullshitting is ethically objectionable. First, to bullshit is to misrepresent what one is doing. By asserting, the bullshitter presents what he says to hearers as if he believes it to be true, but he does not believe it. Indeed, the success of bullshitting relies on the audience being deceived about this fact. As such, the speaker in a certain way misrepresents what he is up to. No. In the case of, I think, the above example, the person is delusional. They don't know the difference, and so they can't misrepresent it because they don't know what they're representing. But anyway, that's particular to the speaker in 2. Second, what the bullshitter says is not guided by a proper concern with what is true. Indeed, because the liar speaks in opposition to the truth and the bullshitter is unregulated by it, Frankfurt contends that the practice of bullshitting has a more insidious effect in breaking down its authority. Bullshit, he contends, is a greater enemy of truth than that lie. Greater than lies are, not that. Okay. The third assumption concerns religious discourse. I take it that one of the purposes of engaging in religious discourse is to express faith and communicate with others on matters of faith. There are, of course, a variety of ways in which this can be done: praise, prayer, parables, and stories, readings from and reflections on Scripture, and so on. However, a straightforward way of expressing propositional faith is by affirming it, that is, by an indicative utterance of the proposition in question. For example, someone who has faith that one may express that faith by affirming one. For if asked why they affirmed one while they would not affirm the world was created by Vishnu. What was one? Let's see real fast. I don't know if we had a one. That was okay, so was one just a thing right there with that one? God created the world. Okay. God created the world is one. So you want to assert God created the world, but you might not assert Vishnu created the world. That seems... the world was created by Vishnu. Okay. They may respond that they have faith that God created the world, and exchange of this kind, and in general, the act of affirming propositions or rejecting such affirmations is a routine part of religious discourse. Affirming one's religious faith in this context seems commonplace and unexceptionable. Accordingly, the following norm of religious discourse seems plausible. AF. Religious discourse AF. A speaker may affirm a religious proposition R if that speaker has faith that R. Note that AF is a merely linguistic norm. It does not confer any moral, social, prudential, or epistemological merit on religious affirmation or the propositional faith that it expresses. However, if a speaker has propositional faith, religious discourse is an appropriate linguistic context in which the propositions in question may be affirmed. Note also that affirmation is understood to be utterances of a proposition. No further assumptions are made about the norms that govern it. With these three assumptions, BN, BS, AF, so this is the belief, faith implies belief, bullshit is when you don't quite believe it, and this AF thing, this, you may affirm it if you have faith in it. We are in a position to see the objection to non-doxasticism, the dilemma. The dilemma for non-doxasticism is this: is the affirmation of propositional faith assertion or some other non-assertoric speech act? Alright, so you're asserting or you're doing something else. Suppose non-doxasticists take the first option. Call this non-doxasticism A. This option has the advantage of taking religious discourse at face value. Affirming one is not, on the face of it, a different speech act to asserting a sentence such as, the universe has continually expanded from an initial singularity. However, if affirmation is assertion, then there is an impending problem. It follows from BN that the speaker should believe what they are asserting. But according to non-doxasticism, faith does not require belief. So, from AF, speakers in religious discourse do not require belief to P that to affirm that P. It follows that non-doxasticism A has the consequence of legitimizing what is prima facie religious bullshit. In asserting their faith, religious speakers should not be constrained by BN. Moreover, since supporters of non-doxasticism, as noted in the introduction, take many religious people to have non-believing faith, many of the affirmations of faith by these people would be prima facie bullshit. Yeah, this is, again, this belief or non-belief into BN, I'm not exactly, I'm not sold on BN, to tell you the truth, but this is what you're going to get if you do this. Alright, so, just the prima facie that assertion implies. Yeah, okay. Well, other than that, I think the argument here is reasonable. There is a straightforward way to avoid this objection suggested by strategy Frankfurt recommends. It is preferably, Frankfurt proposes, to desist from making assertions that to continue making assertions that purport to describe the way things are, but cannot be anything except bullshit. Let's call the policy of refraining from asserting faith propositions that one does not believe assertoric honesty. Accordingly, the supporter of non-doxasticism A could deny AF and argue that it is infelicitous or inappropriate to affirm the propositional content of one's faith unless one also believes that proposition. For example, suppose that Paul has faith that 1, God created the world, and that also believes it, whereas Thomas has faith of the kind that non-doxasticists posit that God created the world, but he does not believe 1. Then Paul can respectively assert 1, and Thomas can avoid bullshitting by refraining from asserting 1. Presumably Thomas could alternatively assert things like, there is a significant chance that God created the world, I support the idea that God created the world. Yeah, so I've heard people say, like, I support things before, without, like, giving full, like, belief to it. However, it is difficult to see why any supporter of non-doxasticism A would find assertoric honesty palatable. First, non-doxasticism A would reject belief as a requirement for propositional faith, only to reintroduce it as a standard of appropriate communication. Yeah, one may affirm propositions that one has faith in and also believes, but not propositions that one merely accepts and does not disbelieve. Notably, it would follow from non-doxasticism A and assertoric honesty that Thomas would not be able to agree with Paul's assertion of 1, despite both having faith in it. Although assertoric honesty is not self-defeating for non-doxasticism A, it is a complication that no non-doxasticist has given an indication of supporting. Second, the proposed restriction on what should be affirmed does not seem to be registered by speakers. Propositions that are the object of faith are freely affirmed in religious discourse without reflection on whether the variety of faithful attitudes is one of belief or mere acceptance. As Wittgenstein noted, one does not tend to find a religious disagreement where one speaker affirms a religious proposition and the other says, well, possibly. The upshot of this, therefore, would be that speakers lack competence in how to properly communicate their faith. Non-doxasticism A needs an explanation for why this has occurred and why we should not come to the more charitable conclusion that speakers believe what they are asserting. Okay. Yeah, so if you take it at face value and you have a norm that when you assert you believe, you're going to run into trouble, because only asserting what you only by forcing the belief as a norm of assertion, you're getting the the problem has returned to the the problem of Moore's paradox has been brought into the issue about faith. Okay, let us turn to the other horn of the dilemma. If religious affirmations are not assertions, perhaps they are some kind of speech act that has the superficial appearance of assertion but does not commit speakers to the truth of what is said. Call this non-doxasticism B. This option would forestall the concern about bullshitting. However, taking this option has the surprising result of pressing non-doxasticism B into an anti-realist theory of religious discourse, hermeneutic fictionalism. In general, fictionalists are about an area of discourse propose theory that one can legitimately engage in that discourse without believing what is said. Fictionalism appears most attractive when we consider an area of discourse that is pragmatically valuable, even indispensable, but we also have philosophical grounds for skepticism about its subject matter. Fictionalism comes in two main varieties. Revolutionary fictionalists propose that speakers continue to affirm sentences of the discourse at issue but change their attitudes, whereby they are not committed to believing what they affirm. Hermeneutic fictionalists propose that speakers are not committed to believing what they affirm in the discourse. Unlike the revisionary proposal of the revolutionary fictionalist, the hermeneutic fictionalist aims to describe current linguistic practice. Moreover, because BN fictionalists typically also propose that speakers of either should not, in the revolutionary case, or do not, in the hermeneutic case, assert the propositions they affirm. Instead, speakers quasi-assert. Quasi-assertion has the outward appearance of assertion, but commits the speakers to accepting rather than believing what is said. It can be seen that a non-doxasticist, tempted by the second horn of the dilemma, has arrived at hermeneutic religious fictionalism. The community of the faithful are quasi-asserting when they affirm their faith. Their affirmations of faith do not commit them to believing what they are saying. The impending problem is that religious discourse looks truth normed. It exhibits a degree of logical discipline as well as logical relations with other areas of discourse that is difficult to square with the affirmations of being quasi-assertions. Here are three obvious prima facie cases. First, if someone affirms 1 and 5, if God created the world, then there is an afterlife, then we would regard it as a logical mistake if they denied there is an afterlife. However, if 1 and 5 are quasi-asserted and therefore do not need to be believed by a speaker, then it would be consistent to reject 6 or even affirm its negation. No, I don't think so at all. Look, if you're going to use logic in the this hermeneutic fictionalism, then your logic is going to be under that scope too, probably, and it should hold under that fiction. So you're going to have a logic that would be in that world, in that religious fictional world, but that doesn't mean the logic is going to fail. You've got two whole sort of different things going on here. You've got the external logic where you're actually asserting and believing, and then you've got the logic in the fictionalism, but you're going to get a mirror image of everything. Like, you've got the faith logic, and then you've got like the outside logic that has nothing to do with the faith, and the faith claims are going to operate under one or both of the logic, but everything outside is going to operate under like general logic. But like, you don't get to deny that there is an afterlife, because your logic is going to follow the same rules as everything else you're talking about under the hermeneutic fictionalist guys. So therefore, you're not actually going to be allowed to deny there is an afterlife, especially if you're already agreed to be in this hermeneutic fictionalist world. So I don't think this is we've got a problem here. Yeah. Okay. However, if 1 and 5 are quasi-asserted and therefore do not need to believe by the speaker, then it would be consistent to reject 6 or even affirm as affirmation. Depends what you mean by affirm. What it comes down to. What sort of affirming are you here? Because you're going to be asserting something right there. And if you're asserting something, you're going to be asserting in assertion B, not assertion A. Just like you're in we're in non-disaxism B, so you're going to be in assertion B that goes along with that non-disaxist program. Okay. Second, God exists but I don't believe it, appears paradoxical or self-defeating. Yeah, this is Moore's paradox. Something happened, I'm asserting something but don't believe it. Hey, I like Moore's paradox. Yay. Makes me happy. But if speakers are quasi-asserting, 7 should be a sensible thing to say. Third, okay. No, and for similar reasons as above, but there are separate problems with Moore's paradox. How you parse exactly the two conjuncts. 7 should be a sensible thing to say. Third, speakers seem to routinely make inferential connections between religious and non-religious propositions. Suppose, for example, that a speaker affirms the universe has not expanded from an initial singularity on the basis of 1. Actually, let me give a short aside. I heard Mark Colleyvan give a talk on logic and fictionalism, and this is where my perspective is coming from. So there is current work in logic in fictionalism that would probably be relevant to this paper. So go read Mark Colleyvan if you're interested in such things. Suppose, for example, a speaker affirms 8. The universe has not expanded from an initial singularity on the basis of 1. Does it follow that 8 is also quasi-asserted? Yeah, sure. The hermeneutic religious fictionalist owes us an account of whether the theory extends to these ostensibly non-religious utterances. Of course, if you're on the basis of 1, why wouldn't something that you're presupposing has faith in the background extend to some of its consequences if you're explicitly referencing it? I mean, it seems like once you're in that faith world and you're using it as a presupposition, I can't see why you're gonna there might be things that get far enough away, but this seems like on the basis of 1, then therefore 8, then sure, why wouldn't it the hermeneutic religious fictionalists be still in their hermeneutic fictionalist world? Okay. Whether the expression of non-doxastic attitudes may exhibit the logical discipline characteristic of belief norm discourse has been a major issue in work on expressivism, and more recently fiction and the imagination. Notably, discourse that engages with fiction behaves in some respects as if it is truth normed. Here are 3 examples. First, imagining that P seems to prevent one from simultaneously imagining that not P. Imagine that Ernst Blofeld is the director of Spectre, for instance, seems to block simultaneous imagining that this is not the case. Sure. I mean, you posit it, so therefore it is. Similarly, it does not seem possible to believe that it is and is not the case that Antonio Guterres is the Secretary General of the UN. Second, the obstacles to imagining inconsistent propositions also deter inferences with inconsistent consequences, such as 1, 5, and the negation of 6. Third, one's belief and imaginings can be regimented inferentially. For instance, one may imagine that the headquarters of Spectre is in France because one imagines that the headquarters is in Paris and believes that Paris is in France. Could the imagining of faith propositions explain the orderliness of faith discourse without resorting to doxasticism about faith? Well, this is all the same problem. The understanding of logic here is a little bit funky. You can have different sort of logics in different sort of worlds, like the fictionalist world and the main world, and they could have massive amounts of overlap in all sorts of things. And so why wouldn't the fictional world be just as orderly as the actual world? It's like imagining the universe is 3 inches to the left. It's the exact same world, but it's not the case because it's not 3 inches to the left. So it's like you've got this logic, and you're just saying, well, we've got this hermeneutic issue going on, but everything else is the same. So I'm not so the idea that the world is orderly I don't really see, or the logic is still just as orderly. I don't see how that affects the Argument. One problem with this strategy is the significant dissimilarities in the logical and inferential behavior of the propositional imagination and proposed faith. Oh, okay, let's see. Here are 3 examples. First, the inferential connections between propositional belief and imagination is less disciplined than the Spectre example suggests. Really? For instance, it's easy to imagine P, believe that P implies not Q, and go on to imagine Q. I can imagine that scientists discover dinosaur DNA in fossils and go on to imagine that they use it to revive extinct dinosaur species, while believing that were scientists to recover dinosaur DNA, it would be too degraded to use for that purpose. Well, yeah, you can suspension of disbelief further while watching Jurassic Park. I like this person, by the way. Whoever this person is, I like you. I like all your examples. Yeah. I'm just waiting for a Simpsons example to pop up now. In contrast, as one has faith that 1, if God created the world, he would not have created an afterlife. That seems at odd with one's having faith that 6. Wait, what? 6 is what? That not the, there is an afterlife. If God created the world, then, yeah, well, that's alright. I'm not... Why would... Right, maybe they'll explain. That seems odd with having faith at 6. Sure. While imagining that one may play a role in the formation... Yeah, again, this is... I'm not buying this. Why would imagine science believe this suspension of disbelief for this sort of thing, but why would that one apply to just this one? The idea of the Jurassic Park scientific leap between finding non-degraded DNA and God created the world are 2 very different sorts of beliefs. So, because God created the world, again, is a belief on faith, and the non-degraded DNA is a something just postulated by the movie to make the scientific hand-waving work. But, like, one doesn't... You're taking the Jurassic Park theory as seriously as some people take the idea that God created the world, which I don't think is exactly... there's no like religious sect that believes Jurassic Park is true. I guess I shouldn't say believes. There's no anyone that has that much faith that Jurassic Park is like was an actual story of the how things are. So I wouldn't equate these 2 premises here. Okay, continuing, even though I'm getting more and more grumpy about stuff. Second, while imagining may play a role in the formation of beliefs, including according to some theories, beliefs about other minds, we are not in general committed to the truth of propositions that follow from the propositions we imagine. Imagine 1 and 5 may lead to imagine that 6, but it is compatible with disbelieving 6. In contrast, the implications propositional faith often seem to demand further beliefs. Faith that 1 seems to require that one believes that scientific explanations of the origins of a universe are false or at least incomplete, rather than merely imagine this. Third, unlike faith that P, it is easy enough to imagine that P while believing that not P, or while disbelieving that P. If the non-doxastic attitude of faith is akin to imagination, then non-doxasticists will have to reject DC. Yeah, I don't think the non-doxast is imagination, so... But that's it's not a bad point for the author to have made here. Although this paper is mainly focused on challenges to non-doxasticism that, emerge from its implications for religious language, further difficulties emerge from psychological properties of faith that resemble belief rather than imagination. Alright. For example, we tend not to act on imagined propositions in the way that we act on believed propositions. I don't know if anyone in the community that believes in has a lot of faith would think it's just mere imagining. So imagining that Spectre is about to blow up London would not motivate a resident to flee the city. Believing this proposition, in contrast, would normally result in some relevant behavior. In this respect, propositional faith seems to behave more like belief. Someone who has faith that God has scheduled an imminent end of the world, for example, will be highly motivated to prepare for it. Sure. Hey, COVID-19, everyone's afraid of the end of the world. It's a scourge for humanity's sins. Yeah. I will consider two responses. Yeah, instead, what you should do is you should read more philosophy, like me. I will consider two responses: a defense of non-doxasticism A and a way of defending non-doxasticism B. Participants in the debate, either doxastic or non-doxastic camps, do not think that either belief or acceptance or acquiescence, assumption, etc., that P is sufficient for faith that P. Propositional faith is taken to require a variety of other commitments, dispositions, and non-cognitive states. For example, some non-doxasticists propose that to have faith that P, one must desire that P. Could these other constituent attitudes be used by non-doxasticism A to resist the bullshit objection? It is difficult to see how any sort of belief in the propositional content of faith will avoid the problem. The speaker of 2, for example, appears to be bullshitting, however strongly he desires it to be true or desires it hearers buy into his bullshitting. It should be, again, if you're delusional, you are expecting people to buy into what you say, but that's because you're not on the same sort of wavelength as anyone else. You're sort of deluded that you're right. And so you might think so in that case, this is the problem. We've got some distinctions here about bullshit that I don't buy. Sorry. It should be conceded, however, that the term bullshit suggests an aggressiveness and dismissiveness that is not always warranted. Frankfurt himself has misgivings about the connotations of the term. Wishful thinking may be more apposite, more fitting expression we'll go with. But even if the objection is couched in less abrasive language, the objection remains the same. Non-doxasticism has the upshot of endorsing in principle the assertion of propositions of faith that the speaker does not believe. Indeed, some proponents of the theory propose that, as a matter of actual practice, this is widely done. Even if we do not call the practice bullshitting, it appears to be faced with the objections that parallel those in discussion in Section 2. That is, there is a breach of trust in that the speaker is placed in the norm of assertoric discourse, and also an insidious detachment from standards of truth. I disagree with the standards of truth. I think you're just operating under a fictionalist logic, which looks exactly like normal logic, which is not really problematic, except you've got maybe a few different problems, but may not be as bad. And that the assertoric discourse issues may also fall into that, because the force of assertion can be seen as a force of assertion under that logic. Different logics may have different definitions of such things. So there's always more logic to be learned. So this is just under a sort of a general conception, sure, this is right, but there are weird things going on with logic, so we can look at that later. One option for non-doxasticism B is to consider the other accounts of religious language that look like allies to hermeneutic fictionalism. Yeah, well, all right. Actually, I should apologize. I was going B when A is meant to be the standard account, just like the naive. It is all the stuff, the normal stuff. My apologies. Could these be used to develop a hermeneutic fictionalist theory? Perhaps the most promising options are theories of religious affirmations that present them as non-assertoric. For example, D.Z. Phillips has been interpreted as proposing that religious affirmations are confessional acts rather than expressions of belief. And more recently, Jacques Derrida and Jean-Luc Marion have proposed that religious affirmations, at least those about God, can be understood as a form of non-doxastic praise or prayer. However, while religious discourse clearly does include prayer, praise, and confession, these theories provide no roadmap for how to interpret affirmations that are not in these contexts or where there is no identified addressee. For example, if God is benevolent is interpreted as something like 11, "O God, you are good." This raises a range of questions such as whether affirming 10 commits the speaker to God's being benevolent, how to interpret the denial of 10, and how 10 should be interpreted when used in a valid argument. These add to the problems of inference and discipline identified in Section 2 rather than resolving them. Okay, that was a lot of fun. I think non-doxasticism B has a lot of might be defended against the arguments here, but this was a pretty good job laying out a basically a standard view on this sort of stuff, because most people aren't going to be so concerned about being able to tweak the logic to make it work. You can tweak the logic, I think, to make it okay in this case, because you're just going to have a few funny, you might have a few funny consequences, but all logic does. So you might be able to get away with some of this stuff depending on how you do your logic. Secondly, the imaginative account just seems a little bit of a red herring. Why would people treat belief just like imagination? Like, that seems like a not giving their faith like imagination. It seems already to beg the question against faith, because faith is not imagination to begin with. But yeah. So, and the definition of bullshit here, again, as the author mentioned right here, doesn't, I think there's a problem with delusion and bullshit. Let's see, get back to 2. I am a stable genius. Yes, I am a stable genius. Like, you might be saying that and you might not be bullshitting. You might actually believe it because you're delusional and you don't know what a stable genius actually is, or you don't know that what you think a stable genius actually is not what a stable genius actually is. You have a problem connecting what you're saying to the actual world, or what the meaning of these statements. Like, so your semantics is all weird. And so if you have a weird semantics, then you speak strangely, and the problem is people will try to understand you under normal semantics, but it's not, the two semantics are not the same. You've got semantic problems. Now, that isn't bullshit. That is a semantic disconnect. So, more work, as per usual, has to go into bullshit. We have not really understood bullshit well enough. Yeah, but this is a highly entertaining article, and it was fun to read on a nice Easter Sunday. I hope everyone has an excellent Easter Sunday, and I will leave it there because that's all I can do. So everyone have an awesome Easter Sunday. Stay safe out there, people, and I will be back later today. I usually take tomorrow off on Mondays, so I won't be broadcasting tomorrow, but I'll be back tonight and then back on Tuesday as I'll update the schedule if anything changes. Okay, have a good day.